Welcome back to Lost Dash channel. My name is Anton Vieltsin. I'm an attorney in the Southern District of California here in San Diego. Today we're going to discuss a case with a situation that I see very frequently here in the Southern District of California. Imagine two individuals are traveling in the vehicle. They get pulled over by the police, and during the search of the vehicle, law enforcement find some narcotics that are hidden in secret compartments. Let's say there's evidence to suggest that the driver made the arrangements and knew about the narcotics. Of course, he can be charged with a myriad of drug-related charges. But what about the passenger who was never told about the drugs by the driver? And because these were secret compartments, a casual observer would never be able to tell that the vehicle is equipped with these compartments. And so there was no way of telling that the narcotics were inside. Can the passenger still be held liable, and especially criminally liable? Well, let's find out. And before we do, I want to thank you for watching me on YouTube, hitting that subscribe button. If you're listening to the podcast version of this recording, please consider giving it a 5-star rating. And finally, if you want to support this channel, go to lostdash.com and check out some of my merch, including the Do Not Arrest This Person t-shirts. Thanks for watching.
Quick message from Lost Dash. Are you charged with a crime? Or do you want to know your rights if stopped by police? Watch California attorney Anton Vieltsin discuss legal cases from the Supreme Court, Ninth Circuit, and California state courts on the Lost Dash YouTube page. Anton has handled hundreds of federal and state criminal cases, has an in-depth knowledge of the law, and has the best mustache ever. Subscribe to the Lost Dash YouTube page. That's LAWSTACHE.
Today we'll be discussing United States versus Rodriguez, which is a 10th Circuit case, and it deals with special compartments inside a vehicle and passenger criminal liability. But first, let me give you some factual background. Husband and wife are traveling from California to Oklahoma. Halfway through the trip, they get pulled over by law enforcement on a traffic violation. The stop somehow led to the search of the vehicle. From the case, it is not clear why the vehicle was searched, but just as a reminder, never consent to searches. Here, during the search of the vehicle, 29 pounds of methamphetamine were found inside the vehicle in special compartments. Some of the bundles were in the rear paneling of the vehicle, behind the fender, and some were behind the paneling in the door, between the outside shell of the rear door and the paneling inside. But note, this was all in the rear of the vehicle, in the door and in the fender. Afterwards, there was evidence to suggest that the driver, the husband, knew about the drugs in the vehicle. The passenger, however, the wife, took the case to trial. She was later found guilty of 2 crimes related to the narcotics. She appealed, saying that she did not have knowledge of the drugs and she should not be held criminally liable. Now, before we go on, let me tell you what the government needed to prove in order to hold the wife accountable. On the charge of conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine, the prosecution needed to show that, number 1, at least 2 individuals had agreed to violate the law. Number 2, Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez had known the essential objective of the conspiracy. Number 3, she had knowingly and voluntarily participated in the conspiracy. And number 4, the alleged co-conspirators have been interdependent. On the charge of interstate travel in aid of a drug trafficking enterprise under 18 U.S.C. 1952 A.3, the prosecution needed to show that Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez had, number 1, traveled or used facilities in interstate commerce. Number 2, with the intent to promote, manage, establish, carry on, or facilitate the promotion, management, establishment, or carrying on of a prohibited activity. And finally, number 3, thereafter attempted to or did in fact engage in one of the prescribed activities. The first charge was a conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute methamphetamine. When we're dealing with conspiracies, we're always talking about 2 or more persons agreeing to do something criminal. The agreement plus criminality, that's a conspiracy. When two people agree to have lunch, that is not a criminal conspiracy. There's nothing criminal about having lunch. But if two or more persons agree to rob a bank or agree to possess narcotics with intent to distribute, that's a crime of a conspiracy. An agreement between two or more persons to do something criminal together makes a conspiracy. If you'd like to learn more about conspiracies, I have a whole series of videos dealing with conspiracies. After you watch this particular episode, I encourage you to go into the folder that has all the playlists and watch it. I will tell you, it is much more than what I just said about the agreements. There's 5 or 6 episodes that go very much in detail about what needs to be proven in order to convict somebody of conspiracy. And of course, we're also going to spend some time on defenses in those episodes. So after you watch here, go ahead and click on that link. But if you've been carefully listening now, you also noticed that for both charges, the prosecution needed to prove that Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez knew about the narcotics inside the secret compartments. Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez rode across the country in a car containing roughly 29 pounds of methamphetamine, but mere presence as a passenger in a car found to be carrying drugs is insufficient to implicate the passenger in the conspiracy. The government presented no evidence that the husband, Mr. Garcia, told his wife about the hidden compartments or about the narcotics that could be found there. There's also no evidence that Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez ever inspected or touched the outside of the car, that rear paneling, or the inside of the rear door. So with that being said, the court and the government move on to other factors. The government argues about the implausible statements. She and Mr. Garcia had driven over 1,300 miles in roughly 21 hours. When stopped by the police, they explained that they were going to an Oklahoma casino to gamble. Mr. Garcia added that they had $200 to spend. Why would two individuals drive over 20 hours to spend $200 in Oklahoma casino to then turn around and drive back home to California? That doesn't make any sense. When stopped, Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez also had a small amount of methamphetamine hidden in her bra and appeared to be very nervous. Lastly, Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez may have known that Mr. Garcia was up to something. When asked the police if she was doing anything wrong or committing a crime, she replied, "Not me." Of course, from that statement, we may think that she knew about the drugs, but that's only speculation. The fact that she says "not me" might mean that she might have suspected her husband planning to commit a crime in Oklahoma, or maybe he was planning to buy drugs in Oklahoma and drive them back to California, or maybe she thought that he was hiding drugs on his person or maybe somewhere in the car. But it does not show or prove that she actually knew about the narcotics or the hidden compartments. The government then moves on to the value of narcotics. The fact that 29 pounds of methamphetamine roughly cost $75,000. And the argument is that what kind of person would trust these two individuals with $75,000 worth of narcotics without telling both the husband and the wife about the narcotics in their car? Of course, she should have known. But that argument is not very persuasive. First of all, we know that the driver of the vehicle knew about the narcotics. So the argument doesn't completely work here because you have one individual with knowledge. We're only talking about the knowledge of the passenger, the wife. And of course, there are no cases that say that the value of narcotics alone proves knowledge. The government then argues that the appearance of the rear doors suggests that anyone would know that there are hidden drugs inside. After all, the rear door on the driver's side could not be opened, and the rear door panel on the passenger side was so loose that it came off the second the police officer opened the rear door. But of course, that whole argument rests on the speculation that the passenger, Miss Rodriguez Garcia, actually tried opening or inspecting the rear doors. But there's nothing in the evidence to suggest that she ever did. There's no evidence that she tried opening the rear doors. She was simply sitting in the front seat, maybe the whole time. So then, of course, the government moves to the last point, and the only thing that they have is the fact that Miss Rodriguez Garcia was nervous during the encounter with the police. The government argues that Miss Garcia-Rodriguez's nervousness shows that she knew that some crime was being committed. There's little question about that, as she had a small bag of methamphetamine hidden in her bra. But the government didn't prosecute her for the methamphetamine hidden in her bra. The government instead prosecuted her for the many bags of methamphetamine hidden in the fender well and in the door panels. And Miss Garcia-Rodriguez's nervousness didn't supply any evidence that she was aware of those bags of methamphetamine. With no evidence or proof that Miss Garcia-Rodriguez knew about the hidden compartments or the drugs inside, the jury had insufficient evidence to prove that Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez was guilty of a conspiracy to distribute narcotics. Both of the crimes that she was charged with required actual knowledge. And here, there was no evidence to prove that knowledge. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of the takeaways. And I think the best way to do it is look at the summary written by the court about this case. The government presented evidence suggesting that the driver knew about the methamphetamine hidden in the car's secret compartments, but there wasn't any evidence that the driver had shared his knowledge with Miss Garcia-Rodriguez. The methamphetamine was hidden in the fender well and the panels to the rear doors, and there wasn't any evidence that Miss Garcia-Rodriguez had looked in the fender well or knew that the rear doors had secret compartments in the panels. The jury could infer that Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez had reason to suspect some crime, but there wasn't any evidence that Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez had known that the crime involved a large amount of methamphetamine. The methamphetamine was hidden in secret compartments of a car, but the government presented no evidence that Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez had ridden in the car before her road trip with Mr. Garcia. Her explanation for the road trip was implausible, so she might have assumed that Mr. Garcia was plotting some crime. But what crime was he plotting? Even if Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez had suspected a criminal plot, her implausible explanation wouldn't have known knowledge that the plot involved a large amount of methamphetamine. She was nervous when questioned, but she was over 1,000 miles from the home with methamphetamine hidden in her bra, and may have suspected that Mr. Garcia was involved in some criminal scheme. In these circumstances, Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez's nervousness didn't constitute evidence that she knew about the secret compartments filled with methamphetamine. With no evidence of such knowledge, the jury had insufficient evidence to find Ms. Garcia-Rodriguez guilty of conspiracy to distribute methamphetamine or interstate travel associated with a drug trafficking enterprise. We thus reverse her convictions and remand with instructions to enter a judgment of acquittal. I hope you learned something about conspiracies and that the government needs to prove knowledge that the vehicle contains narcotics or hidden compartments in order to convict the passenger in that vehicle. Mere presence in the vehicle with drugs doesn't necessarily mean that the person knew about the narcotics and should be held liable. If you learned something today, I hope you hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to my channel here on YouTube, If you're listening to the podcast version of this recording on Audible or Spotify, please give my podcast a 5-star rating. And finally, if you want to support this channel, consider going to loststash.com and check out some of the merch, including the Do Not Arrest This Person t-shirts. Thanks for watching. Now go and watch that series dealing with conspiracies. That's a good segue. Thanks for watching.